So another thing that I'm doing is a lot of, and I'm sure you are, is looking to other institutions to see what are some promising AI developments that we're seeing at some other institutions.
Yeah, I think right now it's still so early. I don't think there's a killer use case that you can point out right now and say that's exactly what we should all be doing. But back, oh gosh, how long now? 30 or 40 years ago, at Carnegie Mellon University, the university just made a strategic decision to say, what if there were just computers everywhere and compute was available to everyone? It was just ubiquitous everywhere around campus. Everyone had access to compute all the time. And they made a big investment in that. And it's turned out pretty well for them in terms of the technical work that gets done there and the kind of innovation that comes out of Carnegie Mellon. Other universities, maybe a decade later than that, started saying, oh, we all need learning management systems. Everyone needs an LMS. And every course needs to have a shell automatically created and associated with it, and every student needs to be automatically enrolled in all the LMS shells associated with it. There's this idea of kind of technology as infrastructure, right? That it needs to be broadly deployed, broadly available. In the case of the LMS, you might even be required to go log into it to check your grades or do things like that. I think places like Arizona State, as well as Marshall, and some other institutions where there's a very public commitment to saying, we're providing access to a large language model to every student, every faculty member, every administrator. Just getting that ubiquity of access dealt with first, I think is so important. And there's so many schools that haven't done it yet. But I think that very soon, in the next 3 years, you'll see, in the same way that every school has an official LMS that's supported centrally, paid for centrally, managed centrally, every institution will have a relationship with some AI provider, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or Microsoft or someone, where they will have licensed campus-wide for everyone to use those kinds of tools. And I think that you have to put the tools in people's hands so that they can play with them, so that they can figure out how they're going to use them. You can't figure out how to effectively use what you can't get your hands on and play with.
Yeah. Carnegie Mellon is the one that I've got my eye on as well. I'm very interested in what they've been doing with their writing program. They're actually using something called, I think they're referring to it as restrained AI. And so they're taking the cognitive load off of students for the grammar and mechanics level writing. They're having them feed all of their critical thinking into it to see how they can use it, almost like we do peer review. So they're learning to use it in an iterative way. And so I'm fascinated by that that's coming out of a writing program because, I come from English and we tend to be a little more anxious about the AI.
Yes.
So yeah, I've got my eye on them too. They're doing
There's a long history of doing some really great computational writing work there for many years.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to my next question. Student use. Like, we do need to get our hands on this, right? Can you share some examples of how students are using AI in beneficial and maybe surprising ways?
Yeah. It's so, these language models are so capable. And I don't mean that they always get everything right. But I mean, you can do anything with a language model that involves language. And if your mental model for working with AI is Google, then you'll ask it certain kinds of questions and you'll get responses back. And that's essentially all you'll use it for is information retrieval. But students keep figuring out other things that involve words, like conversations, for example. So actually the first time I heard of anyone doing a mock job interview using generative AI was a student telling me, I've got this job interview coming up, I wanted to practice for it. So I just told ChatGPT, pretend you're the hiring manager at this company and you're interviewing someone for this role. Ask me 10 technical questions and ask me 10 of these other questions, and then when we're done, give me feedback. And so any kind of conversation that's important to you, that is high stakes, that you'd like to practice, but normally you wouldn't be able to figure out, who can I get to sit down and have a mock interview with me that'll ask reasonable questions and give me kind of honest feedback? The language model is great for that. And so as you think about other kinds of high stakes conversations, like maybe with an employee who isn't performing the way that they need to be, that you manage, you need to have a performance related conversation with them. You can practice that with the language model. So any kind of conversation, turns out language models are really good at conversation. So, and I think we'll see more domains like that kind of open up, where people figure out, oh, you know what, doing this task actually involves talking about the task. I can do that with the language model. And so I've been delightfully surprised at the kinds of conversations that they've had there, or also creating interactive case studies for themselves. I need to practice this scenario. Maybe I'm an instructional designer. I'm working with this faculty member. They haven't got me everything that I needed yet by the date that I needed it by. Please role play this conversation with me. Give me some practice.
Yeah.
Tell me where I've put my foot in my mouth. And make those mistakes with the model instead of making them with the human being.
Yeah.
So lots of opportunities like that.
Yeah, and lots of opportunities then for authentic assessment that we can
Oh,
create.
very much so. Yeah.
Okay, great examples. Okay, well, this brings me around to probably my most complicated question. So there's a little setup to this. We see that faculty participation in AI training is mostly centered around ethics and prompting. This is according to Time for Class. You're a consultant for Marshall's Intro to AI and Ethics, AI Micro-Credentials. And Lumen has a fellowship in evidence-based teaching with Gen AI. Can you talk about your approach to AI professional development and give some examples?
Sure. So when you say professional development, to me that takes it out of the realm of just training, and now we're talking about training people who are going to be teaching.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think there's lots to say about ethics and AI. There are lots of people saying those things. It's not very hard to find if you're paying attention on Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere else. It seems like there's lots of writing happening about the ethics of AI. What I don't see happening a lot is, you mentioned Lumen's professional development around evidence-based teaching and generative AI, is it's one thing to have kind of a context-free conversation about ethics or about prompting, but it's another if you're starting from the point of, I'm an instructor, I'm trying to help students learn, I've got a bunch of tools in my belt technologically that I might pull out the learning management system for this, or pull out Quizlet for that, or pull out, I pull out different tools when I have different needs. At what point does it make sense to pull out AI? Like what is the instructional use case when AI is going to be the most effective tool that I can pull out of my belt? So I think starting from that position of not let's talk about AI because it's cool and everybody's talking about it and you should know about it. Why? Why should I care? I love I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but the original Karate Kid movie. There's a sequence in which Daniel is painting this fence, just painting it, and has no idea why. And he's sanding the floor, and then he's waxing cars, and finally he just turns around and takes a swing at Mr. Miyagi because he's so frustrated. He's doing all this work, but he doesn't understand why. Why should he care? Why should he be investing all this effort? Right. So I think helping faculty see when I use these tools, I can really improve student learning if I use them in these ways. What are those ways? Those ways are evidence-based teaching practices that we've known about for a very long time. How can I enact those practices more easily, more quickly, with less effort, with less variability, with more reliability, using generative AI? And then, of course, there's how can I be more productive personally? How can I save time for myself using generative AI? Can I have it help me draft a syllabus? Can I have it help me draft papers that I'm reading if I feed into it the rubric and tell it the way that I want it to approach that? So I think it really becomes important to ground the professional development in circumstances that are going to make people care about the work that they're doing, because otherwise, when you don't care, you just don't make a lot of effort. We see that sometimes from students in class. If they don't care about the class, they don't make all the effort that we wish they would. And students are people and faculty are people too. Faculty behave just the same way.
Yeah. So don't give them busy work.
Yes.
Make sure that it's contextualized.